creation, the flood, 10 plagues, the Exodus. David becomes king, Babylonian captivity. Hello, my name is Fitz Criddle. In this video, we're going to discuss 20 major events in the Old Testament. At the end of the previous episode, I stated I would discuss why believers need to pursue holiness. I decided to take a break from the holiness series because of an article that I read in the Bible Study magazine. The article is entitled "The Old Testament in 20 Minutes." When I read this article, I had a flashback, and I was reminded how difficult the Old Testament was for me to understand as a new believer. For years, I studied mostly the New Testament and rarely studied anything in the Old. Eventually, I developed an appreciation for the Old Testament, and I began to see the connection between the Old and the New, and I was fortunate to go to a church where they preached the Old Testament a lot. If you've never studied the Old Testament, I would encourage you to at least be familiar with the major events. The article lists 20 pivotal events in the Old Testament, and we're going to go over all 20. Now, obviously, there are more than 20. At the end, I'm going to give you a simple key on how to begin studying the Old Testament for yourself. So let's get started. God created the heavens and the earth. He made the first humans, Adam and Eve, in his image and in his likeness. The serpent tempted Adam and Eve to eat the fruit from the tree of good and evil. They ate, and God pronounced judgment on Adam, Eve, and the serpent, and they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden. God saw that the earth was corrupt and decided to destroy it. With the flood, he commanded Noah to build an ark. God flooded the earth, but he spared Noah and his family. The people of the earth tried to make a name for themselves by building a city and a tower. The tower is known as the Tower of Babel. God confused their languages and dispersed them. God called a man named Abram, later on known as Abraham, to move to Canaan and promised him that his offspring would inherit the land. Abraham is the beginning of the Hebrew nation. The Israelites had grown significantly, causing the Egyptians to fear them. Pharaoh made the Israelites work for the Egyptians as slaves. God appeared to Moses in a burning bush and told him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Now, Moses didn't want to do it, but God convinced him. God instructed Moses to tell Pharaoh to let my people go, but Pharaoh would not listen. So God sent 10 plagues to Egypt as a warning. Water turned to blood, frogs, gnats, flies, killing of livestock, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, and the killing of the firstborn. The Israelites followed Moses out of Egypt, journeying from Ramesses to Sukkoth. God's glory appeared on Mount Sinai. He gave Moses the 10 Commandments as well as the rest of the law. The Israelites conquered southern Canaan and then northern Canaan, distributing the land as an inheritance amongst the Israelite tribes. Israel was subdued by foreign nations. God raised up several judges to deliver them. After the people demanded a king, God ordered Samuel to appoint one for them. Samuel appointed Saul as the first king of Israel. David became king of Judah after Saul's death. Later, he became king of all of Israel. In his 4th year as king, Solomon, David's son, began building the temple according to strict specifications. He completed it in 7 years. Jeroboam led the 10 northern tribes in a revolt against King Rehoboam. Israel is divided into the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom called Judah. Assyria besieged Samaria for 3 years and conquered it. The king of Assyria exiled the Israelites and resettled various other people in Samaria. Now, this was the northern kingdom. Nebuchadnezzar's Babylonian army conquered Judah, which was the southern kingdom, after besieging Jerusalem. They destroyed the temple. Nebuchadnezzar deported the Jews to Babylon. Cyrus, king of Persia, decreed that the Jews could return to Judah and rebuild the temple. Nehemiah returned to Jerusalem and became governor. He rebuilt the city walls and initiated reforms. These are the 20 pivotal events of the Old Testament, and I hope this whets your appetite for the Old Testament. As a side note, from the end of the Old Testament to the beginning of the New Testament, there is a span of about 400 years. In a future episode, we'll discuss what scholars believed happened during that period. I recommend getting a good study Bible. The New Testament writers quite frequently quote the Old Testaments. If you have a study Bible, every time you come across an Old Testament reference, normally in the margin, the chapter and verse will be noted. This is known as a cross-reference. If you don't have a study Bible, I'll show you in the next episode how you can perform your own cross-reference using one of the online Bible studios like crosswalk.com. When you come across an Old Testament scripture reference, don't just keep on reading. Take the time to look up the Old Testament reference and study them. Over time, you will begin to build an Old Testament foundation. Well, that's a wrap on this particular episode. I want to thank you so much for watching. If you find this format to be a blessing to you, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. God bless you, and I'll see you next time.